So it's episode 210 of Making Tracks. So this is the defrost episode. After the awfully cold Thursday morning we spent together huddled like two little penguins surrounded by Jude Law and a load of cast of skeleton crew.
But do you think it's wrong of me to ask of Lucasfilm PR that they at least put some underfloor heating and a bit of carpet?
I think it's always nice to hang out with the guys from Star Wars sessions because they always remind everybody what a luminous being you are in the world of the Star Wars community. So you deserve nothing less, if not nothing else.
I'll take that.
Welcome to Making Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
Boom! This is Making Tracks.
This is the way.
Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Count me in.
Lisa back.
We spent Thursday morning on a very cold Trafalgar Square. My toes have just about thawed out, but it was a lot of fun. We had a blast, but most importantly, I guess, apart from saluting Lord Nelson, we did have the chance to talk to most of the young cast, if not all, of Skeleton Crew, and Jude Law, and John Watson, Chris Ford. How lucky are we?
I tell you what, that was a bit of a gift, wasn't it? Fantha Tracks got a very nice invite to the press event. The Star Wars fan groups, so the 501st, Rebel Legion, Mando Mercs, Dark Empire, Saber Guild, and a number of other influencers and cosplay personalities got an invite as well to this photo call. We said it was first thing in the morning. It was. The call time was at 8:30 in the morning at Trafalgar Square.
We met at the train station at, was it about 6:45 or something?
It was quite a surreal thing because we met up in Stevenage, then hopped on a train and then just kind of made our way down to Trafalgar Square. But it's nice walking through that part of London so early in the morning because it's so busy after really about, I say 11 o'clock, because your Leicester Square is a tourist area rather than like a business area. We're walking through and it's quiet.
It's us and the pigeons, isn't it?
It pretty much is, and the occasional drunk road sweeper. Get down to Trafalgar Square where the crew was still setting up this set, I suppose you'd say, which looked pretty cool. You've seen a couple of the episodes for our screen. It's the kind of thruster spaceship set. Was that anything that jumped out to you as something directly from an episode or something?
Yeah,
or?
It looked like a mini version of the engines on the Onyx Cinder, which is the sort of the key ship that they go off on their adventures in.
Coming to a HasLab near you soon, hopefully. So they kind of had that as like the main backdrop with typical boxes and Star Wars crates and stuff, and a little bit of carpet for the cast to stand on, but not for us. And like I said, there was just us and a load of world press and Star Wars press to kind of do what would be like a typical premiere photo call lineup, just without the screening.
Exactly. And when we got there, we spotted very quickly where the talent would be coming in from. And the first talent to turn up was Jude Law. Well, we were amongst the first people to speak to him. I dare say BBC got to him first, but we weren't far after. We were, we must say, Mark, in Star Wars Cluster 1 with Bill from Future of the Force. And, well, you'll hear it in a second. Jude had something to say about what a cluster is. So here's Jude Law talking about Skeleton Crew.
Hello. Morning. A Star Wars cluster.
Star Wars cluster. That's what
there must be a noun for that, right? Or
I don't even want to think.
What would it be?
What goes after cluster generally? It's probably not a positive thing, is
we'll move on. The children are around.
There are children around. When Samuel L. Jackson got his role in Phantom Menace, he said he would play a stormtrooper. He'd be happy just to be in it, and he got the great role of a Jedi. When you were thinking, I might come into the galaxy far, far away, what sort of character do you think you would get? And are you happy that you got John?
I'm so happy I got John. And the way they described John was the reason I took the job. I mean, I grew up watching this universe, and so it was a big part of my childhood, a big part of me falling in love with cinema, to be honest. Right. And there was so much potential in the way they described the part. I suppose you're really asking would I have just done it and I mean, I don't know that I would have played a stormtrooper. I'm too greedy. I always like a good role, and luckily they gave me one full of potential. And I mean, he's mysterious, he's a survivor, he's quick-witted, he's contradictory, I don't think he knows who he is himself, if I'm honest, and he's a little bit like a big kid.
Yeah.
And that was sort of what was nice about putting him with a group of children.
Yeah. Because he's very much part of that little crowd of...
Well, he's a child himself in many ways, not fully formed, and yet he also he lacks a childhood.
Yeah.
So he sees them as just little adults. He doesn't sort of understand the needs of being a child.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Jude.
So after we spoke to Jude, everybody did a lovely big sort of circuit around Trafalgar Square, or at least our part of Trafalgar Square. And I don't know what you thought, Mark. I thought it was actually very well organised, the way they'd set the stage up for the photographs, the way they'd organised it so that literally all of the outlets, and we felt as included as any of the, again, waggle air quotes, professional outlets that were there. You know, we were involved in everything. We all got to speak to them. We all got our photographs with them. It was nicely done, wasn't it?
It was really nicely done. I mean, I think maybe part of that was down to the fact that it was so cold, and the kids and even Jude, actually, to be fair, kind of either got out of their cars and they weren't wrapped up or anything. They were, they were wearing just kind of like normal clothes and stuff without big coats and what have you. And so I think they wanted to kind of make sure everybody got a little bit of time, because I think they appreciated the fact it was so cold for the cast, but also for us. And we were stood around. So, you do kind of find the moment you stood around, you feel the cold a little bit more than when you're moving. But it was really nice. So everybody got time. We all got kind of the same amount of questions, which I think is nice. And I think, again, also, like you said, it was nice that the main news outlets didn't get any more preferential treatment to what we got. And in fact, I think because where we were near the end, we kind of managed to get a little bit more because we could eke out the time, because they didn't have to rush on to somebody else, so they could see where they were, what they needed to do. So I thought that was cool. And everybody seemed really chatty and happy to talk and that. So, which I think also just gives a nice vibe and kind of gives you a nice kind of feeling about the whole show going in. And I think actually the kind of directors roundtable they put out on YouTube earlier on this week, I think also kind of reinforces that as well.
Yeah, very true. It was nice, as you say, and also the fact that the parents of all the kids was there. And speaking of the boys, Ravi and Robert, we did get the chance to speak to them. They worked their way around the little corner and came towards us. And here's us talking with Ravi and Robert from Skeleton Crew.
First things first, I've seen the first 3 episodes. I've watched them twice. They're awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. You are around about the same age I was when I first got into Star Wars.
Yeah.
What has it been like for you guys joining the galaxy for the first time? Robert, I'll ask you first.
I mean, it was insane. I never really was like, I don't know, especially just joining the galaxy with like younger kids like my age was just like, wow. And I feel like I could actually work with them, and like be like, okay, this is pretty cool. Like I know how to like work with these type of people, and yeah, it was insane. I'm still processing it. Like I just don't know,
Yeah, I've always been a huge fan of Star Wars. We all have been such huge fans of Star Wars. Our dads all introduced us to it, and for me, I watched A New Hope when I was 5, and it's really exciting because Skeleton Crew I feel like fits into the giant puzzle that is the Star Wars universe, but it doesn't at the same time, because Skeleton Crew is such a new idea, a new concept. Kids leading a Star Wars show is very new and exciting, and it was really crazy.
Yeah.
You smashed it. You guys
thank you
smashed
so
it.
much.
Can't wait to see the rest of it.
Oh my God,
thank you. You're going to love it. Thank you.
Love it.
So after we spoke to Ravi and Robert, Wim and Neil, we had the chance to speak to John Watts and Chris Ford. John and Chris have produced, and John has directed. They've written. They've done all sorts of stuff. They worked on the Spider-Man trilogy together as well. They just worked on the recent Wolves film that landed on Apple Plus. So they're very, 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 very busy fellas. But they weren't too busy to give us a couple of minutes on that. And I'm going to keep saying it because it's true. Bloody freezing cold Trafalgar Square last Thursday.
When I'm guessing we're all around a similar age, when you were younger kids thinking, I'm going to do a Star Wars thing in the future, was this anything like what you imagined?
Wow. It both is and isn't. I mean, it's more than you could have imagined. But I had a big imagination back then. So, yeah.
I think when I was a kid and I was imagining myself in Star Wars, I was thinking of myself as being a grown-up in it. Like you'd be like friends with Darth Vader.
Right.
As opposed to being a little kid in Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the perspective we have now as grown-ups.
Well, the perspective you found is spot on. So congratulations.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks.
So finally, we had the chance to speak to Ryan and Kiriana. Kiriana plays KB and Ryan plays Fern, all about their roles in Skeleton Crew.
Hi guys. I've seen the first 3 episodes. episodes. I liked it so much I watched them twice.
Wow.
KB and Fern have got a really cool, interesting sort of friendship and relationship. Can you describe a little bit how you worked on that relationship? Because it's quite unique, it seems.
Well, Disney, they did like some bonding experiences beforehand, so I feel like that really helped with like our chemistry on set. We definitely have a really fun relationship. Like we
What's not to love about Kiriana Cratter?
Oh, wow, thank you. But I think we definitely balance each other out. Fern's like a leader. KB can be more of like a voice of reason and a protector, and I think that's really amazing about our friendship.
Whoa. Yeah, same. I think immediately when I met Kiri, I knew it was going to be the right fit. It was so much fun and going to set every single day with everyone. It was just a blast, and I always look forward every single day. And even on the 6 months, even after 6 months, I was just as excited. I was working with my favorite people ever. So.
And quick practical question, very quick question. Did you guys grow taller during the time you were filming?
You know what's funny? We all kind of grew together.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. It wasn't like one like skyrocketed. It was all kind of like.
Yeah, it was very gradual.
I hope my visuals help there.
Yeah.
That's well done. It's been brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
All of these videos are out on our social media right now. They will also be compiled into a video on our YouTube channel. And we also had the good chance to later speak to John Watts and Chris Ford at slightly more length. And also a call with Nick Frost, who is the voice of SM33, the cranky droid that you will have seen in the trailers. We'll bring all of those to the site and to the socials, to YouTube and to Fantha Tracks Radio on the 2nd of December, Monday the 2nd. That's when the embargo drops, just before the show launches in the States on Tuesday the 3rd, and here in the UK on Wednesday the 4th.
Hello, this is Mark Thompson. I narrate a bunch of the Star Wars audiobooks, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Do or do not. There is no try.
So, as you just heard, we had the chance to chat with Jude Law on the square of Trafalgar last week. Whilst we were talking to him, it was very, very clear that he's rather excited about joining the Star Wars galaxy, but there is a little bit of hesitancy, as he did explain in his conversation with GQ. There is a quote here, and I shall read it. He says, "It makes me a little bit nervous, if I'm honest, in the same way that I felt responsibility to really make sure Dumbledore had a heart and soul that was considered and true. It's the same with this. I mean, there are haters everywhere. It seems nowadays, unfortunately, people have very acute opinions of this galaxy and how it should be handled. Obviously, you hope you're going to get a majority of them on your side, and you're aware that you may not win all of them over." So that's a very aware comment, let's say, that this fandom can drag people through the mud a little bit, have a go, have a pop. We think back to 99 and how Jake Lloyd had a rough and tumble time, as did Ahmed Best. And you hope that this young cast, which we've both met them, we've got selfies with half of them, a lovely bunch of kids, don't have anything like that kind of experience that Jake, for example, did. So what do you make of Jude's points here that some people aren't going to like it and they're going to let people know?
I mean, I think it's a fair point, to be honest. I suppose the difference is that Jude is picking up with Harry Potter with Dumbledore, which is a very kind of beloved character that's got a legacy. He's got kind of like a full backstory, and also the fans are voraciously cross-checking between the books and the films and stuff. The character he's playing in Skeleton Crew is a new character, so he's got the ability to take the performance where it needs to go. And obviously, it's been written, I guess, with him in mind, and also it's been written with a certain kind of archetype in mind. So I can understand why he's being kind of cautious, but I think at the same time, maybe he doesn't necessarily need to be quite so much. I suppose the only thing is with, as you've kind of said about Skeleton Crew, is that really he is a lead adult character. So therefore, there's going to be a lot of focus, and I guess he's the one who's really going to carry the show for the most part, and at least create that air of gravitas and, the grounding that the kids probably won't be able to do. And also maybe that's not necessarily the character's role. So I do kind of get it. And, he's been around for a few years, and that, same as me and you. So I'm sure he'll be acutely aware, as a man who's worked in the industry, of the prequel trilogy and the less than positive feedback that people are giving that. Because you do wonder if somebody who is not necessarily a follower of Star Wars, whether or not then when they get approached to act in a Star Wars, whether or not they decide, do a little bit of a Google search and go, "Oh, hang on a sec, that's a bit strong, isn't it?" I mean, you just look at what happened with the Acolyte. But then I think also the difference is, I don't necessarily think this show, from everything I've seen and everything I've heard about, is going to be anywhere near as polarizing as, say, the Acolyte has been in terms of like, the kind of narrative that they were putting out with the production and the intention behind the production, I think. So this is quite a safe series, which probably means it also do pretty well.
You pick up on some really interesting points there. The first one that strikes me, I wonder, given Jude's age, he's around about 50, so I don't know whether he was in the conversation for Obi-Wan Kenobi and Phantom Menace, for example. He feels like he's that sort of age. And so a contemporary like Ewan McGregor, who has come back in Kenobi a couple of years ago, despite all of the troubles that cast encountered, because specifically Phantom, but also the other two, I think Sith turns it around a little bit. But you know what I'm saying, that those prequel trilogy guys had a bit of a rough time early days of the internet. And now you've had the issues that Moses Ingram had, the issues that Kelly Marie Tran, who's in the news again, has had. Different people have had rough experiences. Daisy came off social media. So it's not exactly unknown if you read just general entertainment press that Star Wars actors have a tough time. But it's the first time I've really read something that was quite so on the nose from an actor saying, I'm very aware not everyone's going to like it. So he's going into a scenario kind of loaded and ready that if the reaction isn't good, he's ready for it. The second point that you made was that in terms of Star Wars shows generally, it's not a sequel to something that's beloved, and it's not a real long shot like Acolyte was something that was a bit out of the box. So Skeleton Crew is a kid's adventure in space, like, I don't know, Caravan of Courage is a kid's adventure in space. It feels safer. I'm calling it saying safe makes it sound lame. It's not lame at all, but feels like a safer bet. Having seen the first 3 episodes and really enjoyed what I've seen, I'm thinking it's so much fun. Yeah, I agree. I think it's probably a sort of summarization of what we're going to get.
So the question I've got really is, are we now in that position whereby do we just assume that any new Star Wars, be it a film or a TV show, is not going to appeal to everyone? Are we now in a polarized fan base that is not likely to be able to be reunified?
I think we're in a fan base now that a little bit like Star Trek. In that case, it's 60 years old. In our case, we're nearly 50 years old. You've got not just a couple, you've got 3 or 4 generations, really. If you got into Star Wars in your 30s, you're now pushing your 80s, and look at the cast. And there's no reason why people in the 30s wouldn't have been into Star Wars. But there'll be a lot of fans who crave the cold tech of the Empire, that sort of action. Yeah. They want Jedi versus Sith, and all the things that they want might not gravitate towards this. They'll just look at this and brush it off as a kid show, when actually, no, it's a Star Wars show that's focused on kids. It's Star Wars from knee height. And there's certain things built into the construction of the story that means they really are experiencing a lot of things for the first time, which is really interesting because you're seeing it as they're seeing it. And also because they're so well cast and so well performed, why wouldn't they react to things the way they do? Well, this is how 10-year-old kids react to it. So all of that is brilliant. So if you can let go of yourself, let go of your conscious self and act on instinct, somebody once said. If you can just get past yourself and just enjoy it as a TV show that's a Star Wars adventure, I don't see why anybody wouldn't take things out of it.
Well, it's something that they said on that roundtable earlier on this week. It's an adult adventure, but you're seeing it with the kids. It's not like they're dumbing it down. We're not suddenly gone into like Jedi Academy territory. Everything's not pink and fluffy. And I think that's the whole point. On some level, you think about it, you have this expectation that adults will always look out for you. And then actually, when you get into the real world, you realize that generally, and I think it's probably fair to say more so in the Star Wars galaxy than maybe even in the real world, they're out for their own. They're watching their own backs and they're covering their own asses and making sure that they're the ones who get paid at the end of the day. And, if that means you have to step on a few kids along the way to do it, well, then that's how it is.
Like you mentioned, Jedi Academy and stuff like that and Young Jedi Adventures, that's a kids-focused thing. This isn't that at all. And that might be the misnomer. And I think sometimes Star Wars struggles to get the message across of what this thing is. Mandalorian's easy. Boba Fett's been out there long enough that even casual Star Wars fans kind of know the iconography and they kind of know what that's going to be about. But you go back to straight after Force Awakens when Rogue One came out, and to us fans it was like, this is how they started the Death Star plans. That's the Death Star. Oh my God, that's amazing. But all the other fans who were general cinema goers who would go and see a Star Wars film, their first question was, so when's this set and where's Rey? That girl on the poster's not Rey. Who's that? Oh, this is nothing to do. This is 30 years before that. This is nothing to... Oh, I don't understand. So what another Death Star? No, that's the Death Star. And so they've had trouble because Star Wars bounces around the timeline so much. I think they've had issues. And I think with this one, the message to get across... And they've leaned into the shorthand of this is Amblin Star Wars, this is Goonies, this is E.T., this is, all that sort of stuff that they openly in the conversations we had openly admit, God, yeah, that was the touchstone. So definitely that was what we were going for, and they succeed to great success. But getting that to a different audience, explaining that to the world, mentioning the Goonies to kids of 15, 16 today. Hey, that film came out nearly 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So referring to the Goonies is like Lucas making Star Wars saying, I want this to be just like the Flash Gordon films of the 30s.
It's a risk, isn't it? If you pin your descriptions by referencing another series or another film or another tone, immediately everybody who's sitting down to watch it, either for positive or negative, is sitting down with that in mind. So they'll either go, oh, well, that's a little bit too on the nose, and it's a little bit too ambling. Or actually, I was thinking I was getting into E.T. and the Goonies, and in fact, I've got something completely different. So it's a bit of a risk. But one person I think was quite savvy about talking about the influences in their installment of Star Wars was actually Rian Johnson, because he just listed so many different influences, and different parts of a film were influenced by different kind of genres, which is so much more Star Wars than actually just one specific one-note influence. If they did that on this roundtable as well, which is on YouTube, it was like, I think they danced around talking about it not being ambling for a bit, and then they just said it's ambling, and then I think they even kind of referenced like Goonies and stuff. And at that point, it's just like, if I try to answer the question, oh, we didn't have anything in mind, but then it's like ambling from about 3 or 4 different directors, because everybody on that table is basically, my age or your age. And it's like, that's for people who would have seen those films. And it's only adults who may have sat down or tried to sit down with their kids to go, hey, watch this. This is awesome. Those kids might remember Goonies if they thought it was cool or not, but then run to the risk of, oh, it's like that film that my dad tried to make me watch, and actually it wasn't that good or whatever. We're in this weird uncharted territory where we've got this multi-generational franchises, Star Wars, Star Trek, James Bond. Everybody's got different jumping on points. Everybody's got their own different parts of what they consider nostalgia. But yet what you need to do is you need to be able to just kind of forge ahead with your own sense of what Star Wars is, rather than, I guess, maybe always looking back to the past and just trying to define something that isn't needs to be defined. Just tell good stories.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
So we now know Andor Season 2, or Andor, A Star Wars Story, will be with us on the 22nd of April, 2025. And in the latest issue, the January 2025 issue of Empire magazine, Tony Gilroy, amongst others, has been talking to the magazine about that season. And he mentioned a couple of things. One was a surprising quote, I thought, in its candor. And he said, I was surprised that Season 1 hasn't translated exactly into widening the audience for people who are Star Wars averse. That it hasn't done. That's our goal this time. So for Season 2, he wants to bring in more people that aren't particularly Star Wars fans into the Star Wars arena. Now, first things first, and there's a second part to this. Do you think that a general cinema goer, or more to the point of this, television viewer who might watch enough of Andor to like the intrigue and the political stuff and all the machinations that go on in that show, do you think that a show like Andor could get them enough into Star Wars that, for example, they'd want to watch Skeleton Crew, or they'd want to go and watch Book of Boba Fett? Or do you think Andor is kind of uniquely its own thing that is in the Star Wars galaxy? Does that make any sense?
That is a very tough question, though, isn't it? The positive part may be like, yeah, sure, if you like Star Wars, watch Andor, then surely you're going to want to find out more. But it's quite contrastingly different in tone to just about everything. Depending on how Season 2 wraps, you might very well go, I quite fancy seeing Rogue One, if they hadn't seen Rogue One, or even I quite fancy rewatching Rogue One. I'm sure there's quite a few people at Disney Plus who are hoping that might be the case. And then at that point, because of the fact that we're so close to A New Hope, you might go, oh, I quite fancy then watching that. So there is potential. You could see there's maybe a logical way of doing it in a linear fashion into the actual story timeline. Obviously, I can't compare Acolyte to Andor to Skeleton Crew because I've not seen Skeleton Crew. But if you happen to be living in a submarine or in a cave or something, and Andor is the first lot of Star Wars that you've watched, to then try and put it up against some of the other streaming shows, I think you'd be quite surprised by the different tonal shifts. It's whether or not you're expecting everything to be the same or not. So it's a very difficult question to ask. I find when I was just going through my news feed back when Andor Season 1 came out, there were people who, after even like the third episode, were like, nah, this isn't for me, and just dropped off.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a bit of a shame. But if that's how more casual fans or more casual viewers are, I'll be honest, I do it as well. If I'm watching a streaming series that I'm not necessarily invested in, I mean, I haven't seen the end of Fallout. because I kind of got a bit bored by about the fourth or fifth episode. But, there's always something new to watch. There's always something else to watch. So therefore, if it's not grabbing you, and if you're not kind of getting it, and that's the other thing. And again, it's very hard for you and I to sit here and think about it from a more objective perspective. How does that intrigue play if you're not very well versed in the Star Wars galaxy? Do you need to be a fan to really think about and understand the manipulation that Emperor Palpatine did to get into power on that? Because there's no preamble. You kind of dropped into this show. So if you're not particularly well versed in the prequels, then I think you're going to struggle. And if you're not necessarily particularly well versed in the original trilogy, you're also going to struggle.
Yeah, well, maybe that ties into the second point. He mentions in the same issue of Empire how we're going to learn more about Yavin. This is Diego Luna speaking, by the way. We move in space more than ever. The amount of planets and sets that you're going to get to see. There are some familiar and new locations, and there's one in particular that fans would be thrilled to get back to. And then this is Tony Gilroy speaking. I mean, we have to end up in Yavin, right, says Gilroy. So we'll tell the story of Yavin. No one has quite dealt with Yavin the way we will be doing it. So maybe that speaks a little bit to what you just said, because to us fans, deep dive stuff, Mon Mothma mentioned in the Gorman Massacre makes you kind of want to go back and watch that little arc of Rebels again and learn a bit more about that and remind yourself of what that was about. That's a great little Easter egg for fans who like to dip and dive. But if you're just a regular viewer, that's just a passing line in a show that you're just getting your head around. So, yeah, I think you're right. To a regular TV viewer, Andor will intrigue because it has got that classic Cold War thriller vibe about it, because it's all underground, it's all tough decisions and high costs and such. For Star Wars fans, it's just loaded with Easter eggs. And the reason why I thought this was an interesting comment from Tony Gilroy was that I didn't think that would be such a consideration any more than any other decision would be. And of course, you want to bring viewers in, and the expectation is that Star Wars is going to have massive viewerships, and it has very solid viewerships, but it's very rarely the number one show worldwide. And maybe that's because it's on Disney Plus. Maybe if Star Wars was on Netflix, it would have a broader reach.
Yeah.
It struck me as strange, let's say, that Tony Gilroy would be so on the nose about wanting to bring in new viewers when it feels like season 2, as we build up towards Yavin and Scarif, has got to show more of the rebellion coming together. You're going to see more X-Wings and, you know what I mean, and A-Wings and Y-Wings and all the machinery of the rebellion that we didn't see in season 1 of Andor, because it was little cells. It was a bit like Rebels, wasn't it? It was like little cells here, little cells there.
And I think maybe you're going to find out things could jump around more, because obviously you have this continual jump in the timeline between every episode block. Is this him speaking out from his own personal perspective, or do you think that maybe somebody higher up has kind of gone, yeah, we really want Andor 2 to do better? I guess it comes down to, like, is there a return on investment? And then it opens up a whole conversation then about how do you decide that actually the investment that you put into a streaming series, because they sunk $250 million
in the
first season. That probably means that a lot of production for season 2 is probably going to be drawn from that. So therefore it's going to potentially be maybe a slightly cheaper budget, maybe. However, what's the metrics of that? Because what does 250 million budget for one season then equate to in the increased subscribership? Or are they looking at it from the tertiary licenses, so like, the action figures and the books and stuff? So it's a difficult one to figure out where he's coming from in that respects.
You say about the tertiary stuff and the ancillary stuff, that season 2, because it feels more like it's going to focus on the rebellion. We know Krennic's back, so there's elements there. There's rumours of Tarkin being back. You wouldn't be surprised if Vader rocked up for a scene. You wouldn't be surprised if you saw the Emperor. So there's lots of potential things that could happen in this. And I'm getting into you say about the ancillary stuff, the toyetic element. You're probably going to have the option to make Andor Season 2 X-Wing vehicles, Andor Season 2 X-Wing pilots, more Imperial armor stuff, things that you think Hasbro, Lego, those kind of people could push and promote, make a big deal of. Okay, it's coming out in April, but, maybe Christmas next year, there could be... Remember Rebels when Rex turned up on that AT-RT? Yeah, and they painted it all up and it just looked amazing, and Lego did a set. Something like that in Andor that's like a standout ship, and it's the big Christmas toy next year, And you go from Andor Season 1 where everyone's wearing beige and brown or Imperial officer uniforms, and maybe you get to Season 2 and there's just more of that rebel ragtag feel that we had in Rogue One, because it's got to steer towards Rogue One, hasn't it? And as a consequence, A New Hope.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe we get some kind of Yavin hangar playset from Hasbro. That would be kind of cool. It's difficult because then, like, you go, well, if a skeleton crew does gangbusters and then there's a cool ship of man, I jokingly alluded to it earlier on, like coming to HasLab, if that ship gets picked up, kind of this weird place, really, aren't we? There's, some stuff needs to be working towards, I guess, linking up with the Mando Grogu film, but like Andor season 2 is kind of wrapping up an era, isn't it?
Very much.
It's two different sides of a coin. I'm just very curious to think what those conversations inside Lucasfilm and the boardroom's been. Or like I said, is it just Tony Gilroy's, that was his own personal expectations that he felt wasn't met based on maybe what the feedback he saw online and from people on social media. I don't know how much he frequents the darkest recesses of social media like Twitter and what have you to find that information out.
Hey, it's Kyle Newman, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
Well, here's a thought for you then, and this is a hopeful thought I'd like to think. What if Skeleton Crew comes out and goes over absolute gangbusters, which I hope it does because it deserves it. It's really good fun. And then season 2 of Andor comes along and the hardcore fandom like us are absolutely drooling and salivating. We can't wait. We know what quality's coming. We kind of know where the endpoint's going to be, because it's bumper to bumper with Rogue One and all the things that we want to see. But a general sit down on a Tuesday night with a cup of tea and a plate of biscuits, watching a bit of Star Wars, because that's the thing that's on that night. They could just as easily be watching Game of Thrones or anything else. And they watch Andor season 2 and they go, oh, it was all right, but it wasn't as good as that Skeleton Crew. Is that a good problem for Lucasfilm? Is that a bad problem for Lucasfilm? Does that give them more of an idea of what to pitch for in the future? What would the world be like if people are going, oh, well, it wasn't as good as Skeleton Crew?
As far as we know, there's no plans for anything further with Andor. It certainly can't be after Rogue One. It kind of feels like, unless they had some kind of clever thing they wanted to do, and, I know you'd always talked about a West Wing of Star Wars set in Coruscant. Unless they were kind of thinking, is Mon Mothma a character that could be a vehicle of her own show or something? Fandom's a fickle thing, isn't it? And what would be interesting, Ben, would be if it was like literally an even split. If they did quantitative research and find out actually the demographic is people of a certain age prefer Andor, but yet other fans of a younger generation or older generation and certain other demographics prefer Skeleton Crew. I guess that's how Star Wars then could go on. It's like, do you try and cater to two different sets of fans on two different vehicles, or do you try and bring the two together and risk potentially alienating everybody? Apart from the obvious timeline differences between, say, Andor and Skeleton Crew, you wouldn't get any crossovers. Well, you could set a Andor style series in that Mandoverse. You could even turn the whole thing with, say, like Carson Tabor and stuff like that, and maybe he's the one who's the Andor character of the New Republic. In that he actually goes out and he's the one who's connecting the dots and finds out that actually there's this First Order or something like that. And there could be that political intrigue because we kind of saw hints of that, I think, also with Ahsoka, and I think we forget about Ahsoka actually because there was definitely hints of that kind of political machinations that we were getting in Andor in Ahsoka, which is obviously New Republic era. And so therefore you could then do something further with that.
What if they said Andor season 2 does great and everyone's happy and it wins some more awards like season 1 did, and Kathleen Kennedy sits down with Tony Gilroy and says, do you fancy doing something like that in the post-Empire era? Do you fancy doing something that shows the change from rebellion to republic, how a resistance is formed? Like you say, you allude to it, and it's definitely in there in Ahsoka. If they gave somebody the chance, I don't know if Tony Gilroy would want to stay in the Star Wars galaxy after Andor, I don't know, but if somebody had the chance to tell a story, serious, political, insightful, after the war kind of story. This is before the war, Andor. You're talking after the war, how the pieces all move, because then you really would learn more about Exegol and how that builds, because that would have to be part of the storyline, and how Leia, and you'd have to recast Leia, so how Leia splinters away somewhat from the formal role that she had before. Mothma in Legends dies. She was poisoned, wasn't she? I don't know whether she's around in canon.
I'm pretty sure back when Leia is still a big deal in the Senate, we don't get any confirmation that I remember from beyond The Force Awakens that she's still around or not. But probably she is, but maybe she's like a Nancy Pelosi type figure, or she could just be retired because she would be that kind of age. She would be pretty old. Yeah, I suppose everybody needs to go out in a hold-on maneuver or something. If they just can just quietly just retire and go back to, I don't know, their garden on Chandrilla or something, and, just retire and die of old age. I guess there's nothing wrong with that. And maybe that's what Mon Mothma needs to do. That is $1 million question. Is Tony Gilroy up for doing something else he didn't create the Andor character. He picked it up from Gareth Edwards. So I don't necessarily feel like in maybe the same way there was some kind of like, I need to see the Ahsoka series through, like with Dave Filoni. He just happened to, I guess, be the right man to do those kind of spin-offs. You think about when Andor was greenlit, you know, we're going way back to just after the popularity of Rogue One. And the Star Wars landscape has changed dramatically in that time. But as a creative talent, I think it would be a mistake to let Tony Gilroy wander off and do something else if there's other properties or other shows that he could potentially turn his hand to in the galaxy, because I think he's definitely somebody that I think is worth keeping around. That is the end of episode 210. We had a listener's question, but probably answer it live in one of our walkabouts around MCM Birmingham, because I guess that's when I'm next going to see you, Mr. Newbold.
It's always good fun going to Birmingham, and MCM's always a laugh, and we've got something going on the Saturday night, so yes, we shall definitely do that.
The guys and girls at MCM always look after us very well, so if you happen to be at MCM Birmingham, come and check out the Star Wars fan groups display. Me, I'll be there with Rebel Legion, the UK Garrison's going to be there, Real Icons are going to be there, the Mando Mercs are going to be there, Saber Guild, Droid Builders, Dark Empire, even got the Sabak League there as well. So literally, if you've got a little Star Wars itch, you want to scratch, come and see our little corner of the convention, and I'm sure we can scratch it for you, although charges may apply. However, if you do want to send in a listener's question, you're always welcome to. We always love hearing from you anyway, even if it's just thoughts or comments and feedback about what we've been doing, or, you know, if you'd like to see more of something or less of me, maybe you can do that. And Mr. Newbold is going to tell you how you can get in touch.
Yes, I am, and here's how you can do it.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show, Good Morning Tatooine, goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
And that's me done for this episode, Mark.
Excellent. Thank you very much for listening. Make sure you check out all the rest of the amazing Fantha Tracks content wherever you pick up your Fantha feeds. Until next week, stay safe, take care, and may the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's another episode of Making Tracks.